My name is Victoria Justice, and I am 45 years old. I know what you're thinking. You've heard that name before on billboards and television screens, and in the mouths of teenage girls who used to sing along to songs I never had time to listen to. But I am not her. I am the other Victoria Justice, the one who lives in Marietta, Georgia, in a house with a magnolia tree in the front yard, and a crack in the kitchen ceiling that my brother told me I was imagining for 3 years before I finally hired someone to fix it myself. I am the Victoria Justice who spent the better part of her adult life believing that family meant something, that blood was a covenant, that a mother's love was the kind of thing that could survive even death and still find its way to the right hands. I was wrong about almost everything. Let me tell you what happened. Our mother, Elena Grace Justice, died on a Tuesday in March. She had been sick for a long time, pancreatic cancer, the kind that doesn't negotiate, the kind that moves through a body like something that was always supposed to happen, like weather. She was 68 years old, and she died in the house she had lived in for 41 years, the one in Decatur with the yellow shutters and the vegetable garden that she kept going even when her hands shook too hard to grip a trowel. She died with her rosary wrapped around her fingers, and the window cracked open the way she always liked it, even in winter, because she said she needed to hear the world outside to feel like she was still in it. I was there. My brother, Randall Eugene Justice, was not. He arrived 4 hours later, driving up from Savannah where he had been living with his girlfriend, a woman named Dina who I had met exactly twice, and who I had decided, both times, was the kind of person who rearranged furniture in other people's houses without asking. Randall came in smelling like fast food and cigarettes, and he cried in the way that some men cry, loudly, conspicuously, in a way that made everyone in the room feel like they were watching a performance rather than witnessing grief. He hugged me. He said he was sorry he hadn't made it in time. He said he had been driving as fast as he could. I believed him then. I want to be very clear about that. I believed him then. What I am going to tell you is not the story of a woman who always suspected her brother. It is the story of a woman who loved her brother completely, who defended him to people who warned her, who sent him money when he asked for it, and kept his secrets when he had them, and answered his calls at 2 in the morning when he was drunk and sad, and needed someone to remind him that he was worth something. I am telling you this because I need you to understand the weight of what came later. I need you to understand that betrayal of this particular kind, the kind that comes from inside the walls of a family, does not feel like a knife. It feels like the slow discovery that the house you have been living in was never structurally sound, that the foundation was wrong from the beginning, and that you have only now noticed the way the floors slope toward the center. I was 45 years old when my mother died. Randall was 49. We were her only children. She had raised us alone after our father left when I was 6 and Randall was 10, and she had done it on a teacher's salary and a stubbornness that I have always admired more than I have ever been able to say out loud. She was not a woman who talked about love directly. She showed it through action, through working double shifts during the summers so we could take vacations, through attending every school play and every graduation and every ceremony no matter how small, through keeping every birthday card we ever gave her in a shoebox in the closet that I found when we were clearing out her house, 472 cards spanning 39 years, organized by year, each one with a small note in her handwriting on the back that said things like Victoria. Age 12 wrote this herself, and Randall, age 16, forgot to sign it but still chose it. She kept them all, she kept everything. She also wrote a will. That is where this story truly begins, though I did not know it yet on the day she died. I did not know it while I was sitting in the hospice chair holding her hand in the last hours, watching the rise and fall of her chest slow, and then stop, watching the nurse come in and check and nod and look at me with the particular expression that people in that profession learn to use, the one that says everything and nothing at the same time. I did not know it when Randall arrived, and we stood in the kitchen of her house eating casserole that the neighbors had brought, talking in the low voices that people use around fresh death, going through the motions of logistics and notification, and the 1,000 administrative tasks that grief requires. I did not know it for another 6 weeks. What I knew in those 6 weeks was this. Randall told me that our mother had expressed her final wishes to him directly, that she had wanted the house sold and the proceeds split evenly, that she had wanted her savings divided equally between us, and that she had named him executor of her estate because, as he explained it to me, she had felt that he was better with financial matters. He said this gently, carefully, The way you say something to someone when you're watching their face for a reaction. I remember thinking it was a little strange. Our mother had never seemed to think Randall was particularly capable with money, given the number of times she had lent him money over the years that he paid back slowly and irregularly. But I told myself that people change their assessments of their children over time, that maybe she had seen something in him in her last years that I had missed. I told myself that, I believed it. I was wrong. Randall managed everything. He contacted the attorney, a man named Douglas Fielder who had an office in Decatur, and whose name our mother had mentioned to me once or twice in passing. He handled the paperwork. He arranged for the house to be assessed. He took possession of our mother's financial documents and her jewelry box and the box of papers she kept in the bottom of her closet that she had told us both, many times over the years, was important. He told me to let him handle it, that I had been through enough, that I should let him take care of things for once. I let him. For 6 weeks I let him. And then, on a Saturday morning in May, I was cleaning out my own closet, one of those desperate, anxiety-driven reorganizations that grief sometimes produces, the need to create order in some small space when the larger world feels irreparably disordered, and I found a folder that my mother had given me the last time I visited her in the hospital, 3 weeks before she died. She had pressed it into my hands and said, very quietly, "Keep this somewhere safe, Victoria," and I had said I would, and then I had come home and been so undone by the visit that I had stuffed the folder into my closet without looking at it, under a stack of sweaters, and forgotten it existed. The folder contained a copy of her will. Not the will that Randall had described to me. A different will entirely. I sat on the floor of my closet for a very long time after I read it. I sat there until my legs went numb and the afternoon light changed angle through the window, and I could hear my neighbour's lawnmower start up and then finish, and then the neighbourhood went quiet again. I sat there holding 12 pages of legal paper and reading them with the particular concentration of someone who is trying very hard to understand something that should be simple, but keeps sliding away from her comprehension, not because the words are difficult, but because what the words say is so far from what she was told that her brain keeps refusing to accept it. The will my mother had given me was dated 8 months before her death. It had been notarized. It had 2 witnesses. It was, by every visible measure, a legal document. In it my mother left the house to me, not to be sold and split to me directly, because, as she wrote in the explanatory paragraph that preceded the specific bequests, Victoria has been the one to maintain this family's stability through every difficult period. Victoria has sacrificed more than anyone has acknowledged. I want her to have a home that is truly hers. She left me 60% of her savings. She left Randall 40%. She left her jewelry, specifically and individually itemized, almost entirely to me, with several pieces designated for cousins and a small number for Randall's daughter from his first marriage, a girl named Kayla who was 22 and who our mother adored. She left Randall her car, which was a 2014 Honda Civic with 90,000 miles on it. She left a handwritten note attached to the back of the will that said in her careful teacher's penmanship, "I know this is not equal. I know Randall will be upset, but equal is not the same as fair, and fair is what I owe Victoria after everything. I have tried to do right by both my children. I believe this is right." I read it 6 times. Then I called my cousin Patricia, who lives in Atlanta and who is the only member of my extended family I have ever trusted with anything important, and I read it to her over the phone. And when I was done, there was a long silence, and then Patricia said, very carefully, "Victoria, what did the will that Randall filed with the court say?" I did not know. I had never seen it. That was the first real moment of cold, specific dread. Not the grief dread that had been living in my chest since March, the shapeless animal of loss, but a precise, targeted fear, the kind that knows exactly what it is afraid of. I called Douglas Fielder's office on Monday morning. His assistant told me that Mr. Fielder had retired the previous year and that his cases had been transferred to a colleague, a woman named Sandra Osai. I asked Sandra Osai if I could come in and discuss my mother's estate. She said, of course. I came in on Wednesday. Sandra Osai was a small, precise woman in her early 50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain, and the manner of someone who had seen a great many things in probate law and had developed, through long exposure, a kind of professional equanimity that I found in that moment enormously reassuring. She pulled up my mother's file. She showed me the will that had been filed. It was dated 2 weeks before my mother's death. It left everything equally divided between Randall and me. The house to be sold, the proceeds split, the savings split, the jewelry split or sold and split. It was signed at the bottom with my mother's signature. I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened my bag and took out the folder and placed my mother's copy of her will on Sandra Osai's desk. Sandra Osai looked at the 2 documents for a very long time without speaking. Then she looked up at me over her reading glasses and said, "Miss Justice, I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you is not legal advice, because you are not currently my client, and I have a professional obligation to the estate. But I would strongly encourage you to retain an attorney and have a handwriting expert examine both of these documents before this process goes any further." I asked her what she thought she was seeing. She paused. Then she said carefully that the signatures on the 2 documents appeared to be consistent, but that the dates and the content were very different, and that in her experience, when 2 wills purport to represent the final wishes of the same person and they contradict each other this significantly, it is important to establish which one accurately reflects those wishes. She was being extraordinarily careful. I appreciated it. I understood what she was not quite saying. I drove home from that office in a state that I can only describe as a kind of functional numbness. My hands worked. My eyes processed the traffic. I made the turns I needed to make, and I parked in my driveway, and I sat in the car for 17 minutes by the clock on the dashboard before I could make myself go inside. In that 17 minutes I thought about my mother writing that note. I know this is not equal. I know Randall will be upset. And I thought about her pressing the folder into my hands in the hospital, her specific instruction to keep it somewhere safe, and I thought about Randall arriving 4 hours late and crying loudly and saying he was sorry he hadn't made it in time. I thought about the box of papers from our mother's closet, the one Randall had taken possession of. I went inside and I called Patricia again. Patricia is a paralegal, which is why I called her. She is also the daughter of my mother's sister Claudette, which is why I trust her. She listened to everything I said without interrupting, which is one of Patricia's great gifts, and then she said, "Victoria, you need a lawyer, not a general attorney. You need someone who does estates and probate and who has experience with document fraud." She said the last 2 words the way you say something you have been thinking for several minutes, but have waited to say because you wanted to be sure you were right. Document fraud. I said the words out loud to myself later that night, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold, and they felt enormous and impossible, and also underneath the impossibility, like the only thing that made sense. Let me tell you about my brother, because I want you to understand who I am talking about. Randall Eugene Justice was born 4 years before me, which meant he was the one who remembered our father more clearly, who had 4 more years of that particular wound to carry. He was a handsome child. I have seen the photographs, with the kind of easy charm that some people are simply born with, the kind that makes strangers want to help you and adults want to explain things to you and peers want to include you in things. He was the kind of boy who was always forgiven quickly, whose mistakes were attributed to high spirits or immaturity or the general indulgence that seems to follow certain people through their lives like a favorable wind. He was also smart, genuinely smart in ways that were never quite disciplined into anything. He had gone to college for 2 years at Georgia State and then left, not dropped out exactly, just drifted away, the way he drifted away from most things that required sustained effort. He had worked in sales, in real estate, in a sports equipment company, in a landscaping business he started with a friend that lasted 18 months. He had been married twice. He had one daughter, Kayla, who lived with her mother in Athens, and who came to visit our mother regularly and whom I adored. He had, at various points in his adult life, borrowed money from our mother that added up, if you summed it over 30 years, to somewhere in the range of $40,000. Some of it had been paid back, most of it had not. I want to be careful here. I do not want to make Randall sound like a villain from the beginning, because he wasn't, not to me, not for most of my life. He was my brother. He was the person who called me when our dog died when I was 8 years old because our mother was at work, and he sat with me in the backyard and let me cry, this 10-year-old boy who probably wanted to be anywhere else. He was the person who drove 4 hours in a snowstorm to help me move apartments after my divorce, the one I have told you nothing about yet but will. He was the person who once, at a family reunion, spent an entire afternoon playing with our cousin's autistic son because no one else would, and because Randall said privately to me that kid deserves someone's full attention today. I loved my brother. I want that to be perfectly clear. Whatever I say next exists inside that fact, not in spite of it. What I think happened, what I have come to believe, slowly and with help over the months that followed, is that Randall was afraid. He had been afraid for a long time, the specific fear of a man who has never fully stabilized, who has never accumulated the kind of financial cushion that makes middle age feel safe, who has watched other people build things, and felt the particular shame of someone who has been building and dismantling in equal measure his whole life. Our mother's estate was not large by any objective measure. The house was worth around $280,000 in that market, and the savings were approximately $90,000, and the jewelry was probably $30,000 if sold, but to Randall, I believe, it looked like salvation. It looked like the thing that could finally make him whole. And the will our mother had actually written stood between him and 60% of that. So he changed it. I do not know exactly how he did it. I know this from what was established later in the legal process, but I will tell you the shape of it now, because otherwise the story will not make sense. He obtained a blank will form, he filled it in himself, he found someone to witness it, I still do not know who, and this remains the part of the story that keeps me awake sometimes, the question of who looked at my mother's name and helped make this happen. And he signed it himself with a version of our mother's signature that was close enough. He must have calculated that no one would look too hard. He had been practicing her signature. I found this out later. He had been practicing it for years, apparently, on documents he had forged to borrow money against her name. This was another thing I did not know until the legal process revealed it. But I am getting ahead of myself. In May, sitting at my kitchen table with cold tea and the weight of what Sandra Ose had not quite said, I did not know any of this. I only knew that there were two wills, that they contradicted each other, and that something was very wrong. I called Patricia. I told her I needed a name. She gave me one. Elena Marsh, an attorney in Atlanta who specialized in estate litigation, and who had, Patricia told me, successfully prosecuted 2 cases of will forgery in the previous 5 years. Patricia had worked with her tangentially on a case 18 months before, and said she was the most careful person she had ever watched work, which was the highest compliment Patricia was capable of offering. I called Elena Marsh's office the next morning. I had an appointment the following week. In the days between making the appointment and keeping it, I did something that I would not have predicted of myself. I became very calm, not the false calm of someone in shock, but something more purposeful. I ate my meals at regular times. I slept adequately. I went to work. I am a middle school librarian. I have been one for 17 years, and the rhythms of that work are deeply sustaining in a way that I only recognize clearly in crisis. And I helped students find books, and I organized the spring reading display, and I ate lunch with my colleague Donna, who is my closest friend at work and who noticed something was different about me and asked, gently, if everything was okay. I told her my mother had passed recently and I was still adjusting. This was true. I did not tell her the rest, not yet. I was learning in those days the importance of what I held close. I was learning that information once released cannot be recalled, and that I would need every advantage I could preserve. I think my mother would have recognized this in me. She was, for all her warmth, a strategic woman. She had to be, raising 2 children alone on a teacher's salary. She understood that the world did not adjust itself to accommodate you, and that if you wanted something you had to plan for it carefully and execute that plan with patience. She had once told me, when I was in my late 20s and going through my divorce, that the most powerful thing you can do when someone has wronged you is to make sure you understand the full shape of the wrong before you respond to it. Don't react, she said. Respond. And you cannot respond appropriately until you know what you're responding to. I was trying to know what I was responding to. Elena Marsh's office was on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown Atlanta, and the office itself was the kind of space that signals competence without shouting about it. Good furniture, organized shelves, natural light. Elena Marsh was 53 years old, with silver hair that she wore short and practical, and the kind of directness that I have come to associate with people who deal professionally with other people's worst moments. She shook my hand and sat me down and asked me to tell her everything, and I told her everything, and she listened with the focused attention of someone who is simultaneously hearing what you say and cataloguing what it means. When I finished, she asked me 3 questions. The first was whether I had kept the folder my mother had given me safe. I had. The second was whether I had told anyone at all, about the copy of the will I had found, other than Patricia. I had not. She nodded at this with what might have been approval. The third question was whether my brother knew that I had found the folder. He did not. Good, she said. Then she said, I want you to understand something before we go any further. What you are describing, if it proves out the way the evidence suggests, is a serious crime. Forgery of a will is a felony in Georgia. This is not a civil matter, or not only a civil matter. This could involve criminal prosecution. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my mother in the hospital, pressing the folder into my hands. Keep this somewhere safe, Victoria. Yes, I said, I am prepared for that. Elena Marsh leaned forward slightly. She said, then the first thing I need you to do is nothing. Do not contact your brother. Do not change your behavior toward him in any way. Do not tell anyone other than Patricia what you know. I am going to engage a forensic document examiner, and I am going to need you to get me the original copy of the will your mother gave you, and I am going to need you to go about your life as though everything is exactly as it was 3 days ago. I said I could do that. I drove home and I heated up leftover soup, and I watched a nature documentary about sea turtles, and I went to bed at 10:30 and I slept, to my own surprise, for 7 hours. Doing nothing is sometimes the hardest thing. I want to say that clearly because I think people underestimate it. The impulse when you discover a betrayal is to confront it immediately, to take the person by the shoulders and say, I know everything, I know what you did. The impulse is to make them see that they have been seen. It is an almost physical urge, like the way your hand moves toward a hot surface before your brain has fully processed the signal. I did not do that. I did not do it for many months. I sat with what I knew and I did what Elena Marsh told me to do, and I let the process work. Meanwhile, Randall called me every week or two the way he always had. We talked about ordinary things, how Kayla was doing, whether he was going to sell his apartment in Savannah, whether I had sorted through any more of Mama's things, whether I was eating properly. He was solicitous in the way that he had always been solicitous with me, a kind of attentive fondness that I had always taken as evidence of the genuine love between us. I listened to it now with a different layer of attention, like a radio playing beneath another radio, trying to hear both signals at once. He mentioned the estate occasionally. He said Douglas Fielder, he didn't know about the transfer to Sandra Osai, had everything in hand. He said it would probably take another few months to settle. He said once carefully that the house assessment had come back lower than expected and that the split was going to be smaller than he had hoped. He said this in the tone of someone sharing bad news that affects them both equally. I said, that's a shame. I said, I'm sure it will be fine. I said, I trust you to handle it, Randall. I was collecting everything. I wrote down what he said after every call, the date and the time, and as close to the exact words as I could manage. I kept these notes in a document on my laptop that I had encrypted and backed up to 2 separate locations. I also had Elena Marsh's paralegal set up a separate email address for all communications with the legal team so that nothing went through my regular accounts. My mother would have been proud of me. I think about that often. She would have seen the strategic patience in what I was doing, and she would have recognized it as something she had modeled for me, even if she never labeled it that way. Let me tell you about the handwriting expert. His name was Dr. Marcus Webb, and he had spent 27 years as a forensic document examiner, the last 12 of which had been in private practice after retiring from the FBI. He was a small, quiet man with the manner of someone who has learned to be very precise because the stakes of imprecision are high. He examined both wills for 3 weeks. He examined the signatures under magnification. He examined the ink. He examined the paper. He looked at 11 other samples of my mother's handwriting that I was able to provide, birthday cards, letters, notes from the bottom of the shoebox. At the end of 3 weeks, he produced a 22-page report that said, in the careful language of his profession, that he had found significant evidence suggesting that the signature on the second will, the one Randall had filed, was not consistent with the genuine signature samples and showed characteristics commonly associated with skilled forgery, including pen pressure anomalies, unnatural hesitation marks, and baseline deviation patterns that did not appear in authentic samples. He said that his professional opinion, with a high degree of certainty, was that the signature on the filed will was not authentic. Elena Marsh presented this report to me in her office with the same measured calm she brought to everything. She laid it on the table between us and let me read it, and then she said, "We also have something else. Her paralegal, a young woman named Brianna, had done a financial records search that had turned up something interesting. Randall's bank accounts showed a series of deposits in the 3 months before our mother's death that did not correspond to his known income. Deposits of $2,000, $3,000, $1,500 that came from an account linked to a credit line that had been taken out against our mother's house. Without her knowledge, without her consent, he had borrowed against her house before she was even dead. I sat in Elena Marsh's office and I looked at the bank statements and I felt something settle in my chest, a kind of cold settling, like water finding level. It was not satisfaction exactly. It was more like the sensation of a long uncertainty resolving into clarity, like standing in a fog and watching it finally burn off so that you can see what the landscape actually is. I thought he planned this. He planned it for months, maybe longer. I defended him to people who tried to warn me. There had been a few such people. My mother's sister Claudette, Patricia's mother, had said to me once, at a family dinner a couple of years before our mother got sick, that she thought Randall took advantage of Elena. I had bristled. I had said that Randall was going through a hard time, and that Mama helped him because she wanted to, and Claudette had said, gently but clearly, that there was a difference between helping and being taken advantage of, and that sometimes the person being taken advantage of doesn't see it, because seeing it would require them to believe something painful about someone they love. I had told myself Claudette was projecting her own complicated feelings about her own children onto our family. I had told myself she was being uncharitable. She was right, I had just not been ready to know that yet. Elena Marsh asked me that afternoon in her office whether I wanted to proceed. She laid out what proceeding would look like. We would file a challenge to the probate of the second will, presenting the forensic evidence and the financial records. We would likely face a protracted legal process. If the challenge succeeded, the second will would be set aside and the original would be validated. If criminal charges were pursued, and that was a separate process, one that would involve law enforcement, Randall could face prosecution. She asked me again, "Are you prepared for this?" I thought about my mother teaching school for 38 years. I thought about her living in that house for 41 years, her vegetable garden and her yellow shutters and her shoebox of cards. I thought about 472 birthday cards with notes on the back. I thought about the crack in the kitchen ceiling that Randall had told me I was imagining. Yes, I said, let's proceed. What followed was 8 months that I am going to try to describe accurately, because I think people who have not been through protracted legal conflict involving a family member tend to imagine it as primarily dramatic, full of confrontations and revelations and moments of high emotional intensity. There are those moments. But they are punctuation in a long, slow sentence made mostly of paperwork and waiting, and the kind of quiet effort that does not make for compelling storytelling, but that is, in reality, where the work happens. During those 8 months, I continued going to work. I continued having dinner with Donna from work once or twice a month. I continued calling Patricia every Sunday. I adopted a cat, a grey, opinionated creature named after my mother's favourite author, Flannery, because the evenings were very quiet and I needed something living in the house with me. I started going to a therapist named Dr. Reyes, who was recommended by Elena Marsh, who apparently referred clients to her regularly, which I understood to mean that estate litigation sometimes broke people, and Elena Marsh had learned to get ahead of that. Dr. Reyes was invaluable. I want to say this clearly. She helped me understand something that I had been circling without being able to name, that the grief I was experiencing was not only the grief of losing my mother, though that was enormous, but also the grief of a revised understanding of my family. When you discover that someone you love has done something this terrible, you do not only lose your trust in that person, you lose a version of the past. You go back through your memories and you see them differently, and this is its own form of grief, quieter and stranger than the first kind, the kind that doesn't have rituals or casseroles or a clear beginning and end. I grieved my brother before the legal process was resolved. I grieved him while I was still speaking to him every week on the phone, while he was still telling me about Kayla and asking if I was eating properly. I grieved the brother I had thought he was, which is a different thing from grieving the brother he actually was, and I did not fully understand the difference until Dr. Reyes helped me see it. In November of that year, Elena Marsh filed the challenge in Fulton County Probate Court. This was the first moment at which Randall would become aware that something was happening. I had steeled myself for this. I had known it was coming. But there is no amount of preparation that fully readies you for the sound of your phone ringing and your brother's name appearing on the screen, and knowing as you reach for it that the person on the other end is no longer in the dark. He called me 17 times in the first 3 days after he was notified. I let 8 of them go to voicemail. I picked up the other 9 and said quietly that I had no comment and that any communication should go through my attorney. He was alternately furious and pleading, sometimes in the same phone call. He said I was being crazy. He said I was being manipulated by people who wanted to profit from my grief. He said Mama had changed her mind, that the later will reflected what she really wanted, that the earlier will was something she had done in a confused period of the illness. He said I was tearing the family apart. He said he couldn't believe I would do this to him, after everything he had done for me. I listened, I wrote down what he said. I gave the notes to Brianna at Elena Marsh's office. He called Claudette. He called 2 cousins. He called my mother's oldest friend, a woman named Geraldine who still lived in Decatur and who had known our mother for 50 years. He told all of them different versions of the same story, that I had been manipulated, that I was acting irrationally, that the grief had done something to my judgment, that I had turned against him for no reason and was destroying the family with lawyers. He was, I understand now, trying to build a coalition, trying to establish a narrative before the evidence could establish its own. Geraldine called me. She was 91 years old and still formidably sharp, and she said, "Victoria, your brother called me and said some very concerning things about you. I want you to know that I have known your family for 50 years and I know something about how people behave when they are frightened and guilty." She paused. I did not challenge any of it. I simply said, "Geraldine, I appreciate you calling me, and when this is over I hope you will feel you understood what happened." She said, "I think I already do," and she hung up. Claudette was easier. Claudette had always half expected something like this. She said she was behind me fully, and she was, and she helped keep things calm among the extended family in the months that followed. 2 cousins were trickier. They had heard Randall's version first, and they had the specific discomfort of people who do not want to be involved in a family conflict, and who therefore try to find a position that keeps them neutral, which in practice means they believed for a while that there were 2 equally valid perspectives, and that the truth was probably somewhere in the middle. This is a common response to family conflict, and it is, in my experience, one of the more frustrating ones, because there are situations in which the truth is not in the middle. There are situations in which something happened or it didn't, someone did something or they didn't, and the both sides' position is not neutral, but rather a way of avoiding the discomfort of taking a stance. I was patient with them. I did not try to persuade them. I let the process work. In February, 8 months after I had found the folder in my closet, the probate court hearing took place. I want to describe this carefully because I think the reality of a legal proceeding is often different from what people expect. The courtroom was small. It felt at first administrative rather than dramatic, with the particular institutional quality of places where government functions happen: fluorescent light, forms on clipboards, the sound of a clerk stamping documents. Randall was there with an attorney he had retained, a man named Paul Greer who was competent enough but who was, I would learn later, operating without the benefit of having been told the full truth by his client. This is something that happened throughout. Randall's strategy was built on the assumption that the evidence against him was not as strong as it was, which meant he and Paul Greer were preparing for a different case than the one Elena Marsh was bringing. Dr. Marcus Webb testified. He presented his 22-page report in language that was careful and thorough and damning, and he withstood Paul Greer's cross-examination with the patience of someone who has done this many times, and who knows that the strength of his evidence does not depend on his affect. Paul Greer tried to argue that the signatures could have varied due to our mother's illness affecting her motor control. Dr. Webb acknowledged that illness could affect handwriting, and then explained methodically why the specific patterns he had observed were inconsistent with illness-related variation and were instead consistent with the characteristics of skilled forgery. He had examples from his 27 years of casework. He had comparison charts. The financial records were presented, the deposits into Randall's account, the credit line against the house, the timeline. Randall testified on his own behalf, which in retrospect was not the wisest decision, but I suspect Paul Greer did not fully understand what he was walking his client into. Randall said that our mother had changed her will voluntarily, that she had been of sound mind, that she had told him she wanted things split equally, because she felt she had favored me in the first will. He said she had told him to handle the paperwork because she was too weak. He said he did not know anything about the credit line, that he had not taken it out, that it must have been something she had done herself that he was not aware of. The judge, a woman in her late 50s named the Honourable Patricia Wynne, listened to all of this with the expression that I have come to think of as judicial neutrality, the particular blankness that good judges develop to ensure that neither side feels read before the deliberation. She asked Randall several questions. She asked him when exactly our mother had told him she wanted to revise the will. She asked him where this conversation had taken place. She asked him who else had been present. She asked him to describe in detail his mother's mental and physical state during this conversation. His answers were inconsistent in small ways. Not obviously, not dramatically, but in the careful way that lies assembled in a hurry tend to be inconsistent. The date shifted slightly between one answer and another, the location of the conversation varied, the number of people present went from 2 to 3. Judge Wynne noted the inconsistencies, not aloud, but I watched her note them in the way a careful reader notes inconsistencies in a text. The hearing lasted 2 days. On the morning of the third day, Judge Wynne issued her ruling. She found the evidence sufficient to set aside the second will and validate the original. She found that the forensic evidence regarding the signature, combined with the financial records suggesting improper use of the estate's assets, created sufficient grounds to conclude that the second will did not represent the genuine testamentary wishes of Elena Grace Justice. She referred the matter to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for further review of potential criminal charges. I sat in that courtroom and I listened to all of this, and I felt something that I have struggled to name accurately ever since. It was not triumph. It was not relief exactly, though relief was part of it. It was something closer to what I imagine a very long fever feels like when it finally breaks, the return of your own body to its natural temperature, the sense of returning to baseline. My mother's wishes were going to be honored. That was the center of it. Not what I received, not even the justice of it, but simply the fact that what she had wanted, what she had carefully written and signed and had witnessed and pressed into my hands, was going to be done. Randall looked at me across the courtroom when the ruling was read. I looked back at him. I did not look away, and I did not look at him with hatred, because I did not feel hatred, not exactly. I felt the strange double vision that I had been living with for 8 months, seeing both the brother I had grown up with and the person who had done this, and the grief of understanding that they were the same person. He started to say something. His attorney put a hand on his arm. I turned back to Elena Marsh, who was making notes on her legal pad with the calm efficiency of someone who does this work regularly and does not require a moment of drama to mark the end of it. I thought, this is what competence looks like. This is what it looks like when someone does their job with integrity and precision. I was enormously grateful to her. We walked out of the courthouse into a cold February afternoon, Elena Marsh and Brianna and me. And Elena said, "Well done," and I said thank you, and Brianna, who was 26 and idealistic in the way that young people in good work should be, said, "I'm really glad this went the right way." Patricia had driven down from her office and was waiting in the lobby. She hugged me for a long time without saying anything, which was exactly right. The criminal process took another year. I will not give you every detail of it because much of it was not mine to witness directly. It was a matter between the district attorney's office and Randall, and my role was primarily as a witness rather than a party. What I will tell you is this: Randall was charged with will forgery, financial exploitation of an elder, and bank fraud related to the fraudulent credit line. He retained a criminal defense attorney. The process was long and grinding in the way that criminal processes are. He eventually pleaded guilty to will forgery and financial exploitation of an elder, in exchange for the bank fraud charge being dropped. He was sentenced to 4 years, with the possibility of parole after 2, and ordered to pay full restitution of the money he had taken from the estate. I was not present for the sentencing. Elena Marsh attended and represented my interests in the victim impact portion of the proceeding, reading a statement that I had written. I spent that day at work, helping students find books for the spring reading program, and then I went home and fed Flannery and made dinner and sat at my kitchen table and thought about my mother. I thought about her teaching school for 38 years, about the 38 years of other people's children that she had helped learn to read, to write, to understand the world through language. I thought about how she had kept 472 birthday cards in a shoebox, organized by year, each one annotated in her careful handwriting. I thought about the vegetable garden and the yellow shutters and the house that now, by the terms of her genuine will, was mine. I thought about the night she gave me the folder in the hospital. She had been weakened by then, but still herself, still precise, still entirely purposeful. She had pressed the folder into my hands and said, "Keep this somewhere safe, Victoria," and there had been something in her voice that I had attributed, at the time, to the general urgency that terminal illness brings to all speech, the sense that every statement might need to carry more than it usually would. Now I understood it differently. She knew, or she suspected. She had given me what I needed to protect her wishes because she had understood on some level that her wishes needed protecting, from her own son, from her own child. I'm not sure whether this makes it better or worse. I think about it often. I think she must have wanted very much to be wrong about him, in the way that parents want to be wrong about the worst things they fear about their children. I think she gave me the folder precisely because she wanted the option of being wrong. If Randall did the right thing, the folder would stay in my closet, and nothing would ever need to happen. She was giving me the tool for a contingency she hoped would not arise. The contingency arose. I used the tool. The house is mine now. It has been mine, legally and officially, for 8 months, and I have been slowly doing things to it, not massive renovations, just the accumulated care that comes from having time and the certain ownership of a space. I replaced the kitchen ceiling, which was water damaged and had a crack that was, I can confirm, entirely real. I repainted the front door a slightly different shade of yellow, a warmer one, because I wanted to keep the yellow shutters but make them feel like my choice rather than a preservation. I kept the vegetable garden going, badly at first and then less badly as I learned what I was doing. And last summer I grew tomatoes and green beans, and the same kind of herbs my mother always grew, basil and rosemary, and the flat-leaf parsley that she put in everything. The shoebox of birthday cards is on a shelf in my bedroom. I have not sorted it or reorganized it. I left it exactly as she left it. Patricia comes over for dinner regularly now, and sometimes Geraldine, who is 92 and still formidably sharp, and who told me at Christmas that she thought Elena would be very pleased. Donna from work has been here a few times. I have a life of a size that feels, for the first time in a long time, like mine, not too large, not performing a size I don't actually occupy, just the particular shape of a 45-year-old woman who knows what she values and who is learning slowly to treat those things accordingly. Randall is in a correctional facility in South Georgia. His daughter Kayla calls me occasionally, and I always pick up, because none of this is her fault and she is 22 years old, and she lost her father and her grandmother in the same year in very different ways. I try to be an aunt to her the way I always was, the way our mother would have wanted. She is studying environmental science at the University of Georgia, and she has a very funny, dry sense of humor, and she is, I think, going to be okay. Dina, the girlfriend from Savannah, is apparently no longer in the picture. I do not know any more than that. I did not invite Randall to respond to my victim impact statement. I did not speak to him directly after the probate ruling. If he writes to me from prison, I do not know what I will do. I have not decided. Dr. Reyes and I have discussed it. She says there is no correct answer, only the answer I can live with, which is the kind of thing she says that sounds like a platitude until you sit with it long enough to realize it is actually precise. I have thought a lot in the months since all of this resolved about what it means to betray a family member. I have thought about the particular quality of that betrayal, the fact that it works precisely because it exploits trust, that it is most effective against the people who love you most, who are therefore least likely to look for evidence of your worst capacities. Randall knew I would not look hard at what he told me. He knew I would trust him with the paperwork, because I had always trusted him with things that were important to me, because we were family and that is what family does. He was right until he wasn't. The thing I want to say, the thing I am still working out how to say, is that I do not think what happened to me was exceptional. I think it happens more than people know, in more families than would like to admit it. I think there are a lot of Victorias and a lot of Randalls, though most of them never end up in a probate court, because most of them do not have a mother who pressed a folder of documents into their hands with a look that said, in retrospect, I am giving you what you will need. I had that, not everyone does. If you are reading this because something similar is happening to you, or because you suspect something similar is happening to you, I want to say this as directly as I can. Trust the instinct that brought you here. Trust the thing that is making you read these words. And then, and this is the part I did not know to do until I had someone very good help me figure it out, Do not move yet. Learn the full shape of what you're dealing with first. And when you're ready, find someone like Elena Marsh who has done this before and knows how the process works. Because the process, when it is working right, is remarkably good at finding the truth. It is slow and expensive and emotionally brutal, but it finds the truth. The truth found me on a Saturday morning in May, in the back of my closet under a stack of sweaters. My mother put it there. She trusted me to find it when I needed it. I think about that all the time. My name is Victoria Justice, and I am 45 years old. My mother's name was Elena Grace Justice, and she was a careful woman who loved her children and knew their natures, and tried to be fair. And she was also a woman who understood that the tools you leave behind for the people you love can protect them long after you are gone. She gave me the right tool. I used it at the right time. Her wishes are honoured, and her house has yellow shutters and tomatoes in the summer, and a shoebox of birthday cards on a shelf in the bedroom, organised by year, each one with a small note on the back in her handwriting. That is justice, not the legal kind, though it was that too, the older kind, the kind that means things happened the way they were supposed to happen, according to the values of someone who mattered and who is gone and whose voice still lives in those small, careful notes. I will not tell you that I have forgiven my brother, because I do not know whether that word applies yet, or whether it ever will in the way people use it. What I will tell you is that I have stopped protecting him. I stopped protecting him when I walked into Sandra Osai's office and put my mother's copy of her will on the desk. I stopped protecting him when I said, to Elena Marsh, yes, let's proceed. Before that I had spent 45 years protecting him in small ways, defending him to people who were skeptical of him, covering for him in family conversations, telling myself that his failures were the understandable consequence of hard circumstances and not the predictable result of character. I had spent 45 years believing that loyalty to family required me to extend to him, always, the most charitable interpretation I could find. Loyalty does not require that. I know that now. Loyalty requires honesty, including the honesty of finally seeing a person as they are rather than as you need them to be. My mother saw Randall as he was. She made provisions accordingly. She gave me the tools to protect what she had built. I think about her every day. I miss her in the particular way you miss someone who was both your parent and, in later years, something more like a peer, someone who had seen you grow into yourself and who treated you, in the end, as an adult capable of handling difficult things. She trusted me with this. She believed I would know what to do. I hope I did it the way she would have wanted. I redecorated the house a little. Not much, she is still everywhere in it, in the furniture she chose and the light fixtures she picked out, and the way the kitchen smells in the morning when the window is cracked open, even in winter, because I have started cracking it open too. But I put some of my own things in it, some books from my own shelves, a print I bought at an art show that I would not have expected her to like, but that I think she would have surprised me about. A chair in the reading corner that is the right height for me rather than for her. It is her house and it is my house. It is the house I am going to live in for a long time, and I am going to take care of it, and I am going to grow things in the garden every summer, and I am going to eat dinner there with the people I love, and I am going to keep the shoebox of birthday cards exactly where it is. Keep this somewhere safe, Victoria. I will, Mama, I will. Some betrayals come from outside the family. Those are terrible. But the ones that come from inside it, from the people who know the full geography of your trust, who know exactly where the vulnerable places are, who have spent years learning how you love, those are the ones that require a different kind of recovery. Not harder necessarily, but different, because you are not only recovering from what was done to you. You are recovering a revised understanding of your own history, and that takes time and care, and the specific help of people like Dr. Reyes and Elena Marsh and Patricia and Donna and Geraldine, who is 92 and still sharp, and who told me over dinner in March that she always thought Elena had good judgment about people, and that the will she left reflected that. I told her I thought so too. I am still afraid sometimes, in the way that people are afraid after something like this, not of specific threats, but of the more general vulnerability of trust, the knowledge that love can be used against you by the people who know you best. I am more careful now about the information I carry and who I carry it to. I am more attentive to the small inconsistencies that I used to smooth over, the places where the story someone tells doesn't quite match the story the facts tell. But I am not closed off. I want to say that clearly because I think it matters. What happened to me did not make me into someone who keeps everyone at a distance. It made me into someone who is more intentional about who I let close and what I trust them with. Patricia and Donna and Geraldine and Kayla, who calls from Athens about her environmental science classes and her dry sense of humor, these are the people I let close. This is the particular family I have constructed from what remained, and it is the right size for the life I actually live. Flannery the cat is sitting on the couch next to me as I write this. She is opinionated and grey and has not softened at all in the 2 years I have had her, which I find refreshing. My mother would have liked her. The window is cracked open. The world is outside, going on. I am in it. If someone in your family is doing something that does not add up, if the story you're being told keeps slipping slightly from one telling to the next, if there are documents you haven't seen and explanations that arrive preemptively, if you find something in a closet under a stack of sweaters that makes the world rearrange itself around a new fact, trust that. Trust the instinct that says, wait, this doesn't match. And then do what my mother taught me, don't react. Respond. But first, know the full shape of what you're responding to. The truth has a shape. It takes a while to see it clearly, especially when the people obscuring it are people you love, but it has a shape and it is patient and it will eventually be visible. My mother knew that. She planned accordingly. I am the beneficiary of her clarity. I am also, I have come to understand, the beneficiary of her love, not the love that we say easily, the everyday love that passes between family members like a habitual greeting, but the harder love, the love that makes you press a folder of documents into your daughter's hands in a hospital room and say, keep this somewhere safe, because you trust that she will know what to do with it even after you are gone. That is the love that takes real courage to offer. That is the love that requires you to see your child clearly, to know what she is capable of, to believe that she will be equal to whatever comes. She believed that about me. I am trying every day to be equal to it. My name is Victoria Justice. I am 45 years old. My mother left me the right tools and I used them, and the truth came out, and the house has yellow shutters and it is mine, in the way she intended it to be mine, because she loved me and she was a careful woman, and she knew that careful love sometimes means leaving the right things in the right hands for the right moment. I am grateful, I am still grieving. I am also, quietly and without performance, okay. That is enough, that is more than enough. That is everything.